My name is Mary, and I was born in Texas more than 70 years ago. Life here has always been about simple things: working hard, putting food on the table, and raising your children the best you can. I never had much growing up. My parents worked the land, and I grew up in a wooden house with creaky floors and a porch that always smelled like rain whenever a storm passed through. We didn't have riches, but we had family, and to me that was everything. When I was young, I promised myself that if I ever became a mother, my children would always know love, comfort, and care, no matter what I had to sacrifice to give it to them. And so when I had my only son, David, I poured every ounce of myself into him. From the moment he was born, I felt like my whole world changed. I remember his tiny fingers curling around mine, the way he cried at night until I sang him to sleep, and the way he used to crawl around the kitchen floor while I cooked supper. His laughter filled that little Texas house with so much joy that sometimes I thought my heart would burst. I raised him mostly on my own, since his father left us when David was still a little boy. That was a heartbreak I carried quietly, but I didn't let it stop me from being both mother and father. I worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses during the day and sewing late into the night. Many times I went to bed with sore hands and an aching back, but when I looked at David's face, all of it felt worth it. As David grew older, I tried to teach him the values that were passed down to me: respect, kindness, and gratitude. I wanted him to know that no matter how hard life gets, family is what keeps us standing. I remember teaching him to ride a bike on the dusty road outside our house. He fell and scraped his knee, and though tears filled his eyes, he looked up at me and said, "Don't worry, Mama, I'll get it." That's when I knew he had strength in him, the kind of strength that would carry him far. I used to pray every night that his life would be better than mine, that he'd have opportunities one never had, that he'd never feel the emptiness of being abandoned, and that he'd never have to go without love. When David became a teenager, things started to change, as they often do. He pulled away a little, spent more time with his friends than with me, and sometimes acted like he was embarrassed of the old car I drove or the worn clothes I wore. I understood it was just part of growing up, but deep down it still stung. I reminded myself that all children go through phases, and that one day he'd come back to me with the same closeness we once shared. After all, I was his mother. Surely nothing could ever break that bond. I'll never forget the day he told me he got accepted into college. I cried tears of joy, proud that my son would be the first in our family to step into that kind of future. I worked extra hours, sold some of my jewelry, and even gave up on fixing the leaky roof for a while, just to make sure he had what he needed for his dorm. I didn't care if I had to eat bread and beans for a month. Seeing him walk into that school was worth it. I hugged him so tight that day and whispered, "Remember, David, no matter where you go, Mama's always here." He nodded, but I noticed his eyes were already looking ahead, toward a life that didn't include me as much. College changed him. Each time he came back home for the holidays, he seemed a little different. He dressed differently, spoke differently, and sometimes acted like the old house he grew up in wasn't good enough for him anymore. I tried not to take it personally. I cooked his favorite meals, asked him about his classes, and listened even when he spoke about things I didn't understand. I wanted him to know I was proud of him, that all his success was a reflection of the sacrifices we had both made. But slowly, I began to feel the distance growing wider between us. Phone calls became shorter, visits less frequent. He'd forget to tell me important things, like when he landed a job or when he was moving to a new city. Instead, I'd hear it from neighbors or through his social media, which I barely knew how to use. Still, I never let bitterness take root. I kept telling myself, he's busy building his life. That's what I raised him for. And yet, in the quiet of the night, sitting alone in my living room with the old clock ticking on the wall, I sometimes wondered if I had given him too much, if by giving him everything, I had taught him to forget me. Then came the day that changed everything. I woke up one morning, brewed my coffee like I always did, and while scrolling through my phone with my shaky hands, I saw a picture that froze my heart. There was my son standing in a suit, holding the hand of a young woman in a white dress, smiling brighter than I had ever seen him smile. They were at an altar. Behind them stood flowers, guests, and joy. My son had gotten married, and I hadn't even known. I hadn't been invited. My name wasn't on any list. No letter had come in the mail. No phone call had been made. My own flesh and blood had chosen to start a new life, and he had chosen to do it without me. In that moment, the house around me felt smaller than ever, like the walls were pressing in. I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded so loudly I thought I might faint. All the years of sacrifice, all the nights I stayed awake to comfort him, all the meals I skipped so he could have more, all of it came rushing back, colliding with the image of that wedding I was never meant to see. That was the day I realized that sometimes the deepest pain doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the ones you love the most. And for me, that pain began in Texas, in the same small town where I gave my son everything, only to be left behind when it mattered most. I remember the exact morning like it was yesterday, though part of me wishes I could forget it. It was a Saturday, and the sun was already beating down heavy on the Texas ground, heating the porch boards until they almost burned my feet when I stepped outside. I had woken up early, like I always do, brewed myself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window where I usually watched the birds peck around the yard. Life in my little house is quiet, sometimes too quiet, and the small sounds, birds, wind, the distant rumble of a truck on the highway, keep me company. I held my phone in my hand, not expecting much. I don't understand all these new gadgets the way younger folks do, but I've learned just enough to check the weather, see pictures, and sometimes hear from relatives far away. That morning, though, I saw something that nearly knocked the breath right out of me. It was a picture of my son, David, standing tall in a dark suit, his arm wrapped proudly around a woman I had only heard about in passing. She was in a long white gown, her face glowing with joy. Behind them were rows of flowers, chairs filled with smiling guests, and a preacher at the front. It was a wedding, my son's wedding, and I wasn't there. My hands shook so bad the coffee nearly spilled in my lap. My eyes blurred with tears, and I stared at the screen like maybe I was mistaken, like maybe it was just some rehearsal or a friend's celebration. But no, the caption written by someone else in the photo confirmed it. Congratulations to David and Emily on their beautiful wedding day. For a moment, I couldn't move. It felt like my heart had stopped. My own son, my only child, had gotten married and I hadn't even known. No invitation, no phone call, not even a message telling me it was happening. I sat there frozen, my chest so tight I thought I might not be able to breathe. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't fall just yet. All I could think about was how many nights I had prayed for this boy, how many mornings I had gone without breakfast so he could eat, how many sacrifices I made so he could have the chance to live a better life. And here he was, taking the biggest step of his life without me by his side. As the day went on, the news spread through town like wildfire. In a small Texas town, everybody knows everybody, and secrets don't stay secrets for long. Neighbors started calling me, not to comfort me, but to ask questions. Mary, did you know David was getting married? Why weren't you there? Did something happen between you two? Each question felt like salt being rubbed into an open wound. I didn't have answers for them. All I could say was, I didn't know. I wasn't invited. The words tasted bitter every time I spoke them. Later that afternoon, I heard voices outside. I peeked through the curtains and saw some of the women from down the street gathered on the sidewalk, whispering and pointing toward my house. Their faces carried that mix of pity and gossip that cuts deep. I knew what they were thinking. They were thinking I must have done something so terrible that my son wanted nothing to do with me. They were thinking I wasn't the good mother I always tried to be. They didn't know the truth, that I gave him my entire life, every ounce of love I had, and in return I was left out of the one day I dreamed of sharing with him. The night after I found out, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the light on, staring at the clock as it ticked past midnight, then 1, then 2. My heart was restless, my mind full of memories. I remembered the little boy who used to run into my arms after school, who used to say, "Mama, you're my best friend." I remembered the teenager who rolled his eyes at me but still asked me to wash his jersey before the big game. I remembered the young man leaving for college, his suitcase in hand, turning back one last time to hug me. Somewhere along the line, I lost that boy. Somewhere along the line, he decided I didn't belong in his future. What hurt even more was hearing about all the people who were there. The neighbors told me they saw pictures online of David's father, my ex-husband, sitting proudly in the front row. That man who walked out on us when David was just a child, who never sent a dime of support, who never sat by our boy's bed when he was sick. He got an invitation. He got a seat of honor. And me, the woman who raised him alone, who held his hand through everything, I was nowhere to be found. I can't describe the kind of pain that brings. It's not the kind of pain you feel when you scrape your knee or when you catch a cold. It's the kind of pain that settles deep into your bones, that makes your chest ache every time you take a breath. It's betrayal, loneliness, and grief all rolled into one. I thought of the empty chair that should have been mine, the empty spot where a mother should stand, and I wondered if anyone at that wedding even asked, "Where's his mama?" The days that followed were the hardest. I couldn't walk into the grocery store without whispers following me. I couldn't sit on my porch without someone stopping by to say, "I'm so sorry, Mary," in that tone that carries more judgment than sympathy. My heart ached every time I saw another picture online. David dancing with his bride, David laughing with his father, David cutting the cake. Those were the moments I had dreamed of witnessing, the moments I thought would bring my years of sacrifice full circle. But instead, I watched them from the outside, like a stranger peering through a window. I don't know why he chose to shut me out. I've replayed every memory, every conversation, every possible mistake I might have made. Was I too strict when he was young? Did I embarrass him with my old ways? Did he grow ashamed of the small life I gave him? I'll never know, because he hasn't called me to explain. And maybe that's the worst part of all. Not the wedding itself, but the silence that followed. The silence of a son who once called me his whole world and now acts as though I don't exist. That night, as I sat alone in my bed, I whispered a prayer. I asked God to give me strength to heal the hole in my heart and to remind me that I am still a mother, even if my son has forgotten me. And though the tears finally came, rolling down my cheeks until my pillow was soaked, I told myself one thing I still believe to this day. Love doesn't disappear just because it's not returned. My love for David is still here, strong as ever. And maybe, just maybe, one day he'll remember it. The days after I discovered my son's wedding were some of the loneliest days of my life. You'd think a mother gets used to quiet once her children grow up and leave home. But this quiet was different. This quiet wasn't just the sound of an empty house. It was the silence of being shut out of my own child's life. I woke up every morning with the same routine. Make a small breakfast, feed the stray cats that wander into my yard, sit by the window with my cup of coffee. But now, everything felt heavier. Even the coffee didn't taste the same, and the sun seemed harsher through the window. I kept glancing at my phone, hoping maybe there would be a message from David, an explanation, a small "Mama, I'm sorry." But the phone stayed silent. Neighbors continued to talk. Some meant well, others didn't. I remember going into the grocery store one morning, my list clutched tight in my hand, hoping to just grab a few things and leave quickly. But as soon as I stepped inside, I felt the stares. People knew. In a small Texas town, news travels faster than the wind, and by then, everyone had seen the pictures. I overheard two women whispering in the bread aisle, "Poor Mary, can you believe her own son didn't invite her?" Another voice replied, "Makes you wonder what kind of mother she was." I froze right there, pretending to look at the shelves, my eyes burning. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know the nights I stayed up sewing his clothes when he was little, the mornings I skipped meals so he could have more. They didn't know how many times I held his hand when he cried. People are quick to judge, but they never see the whole picture. When I got back home, I broke down. I sat in my rocking chair, rocking back and forth like I used to when David was a baby, and I cried until my chest hurt. I felt like I had failed, not just as a mother, but as a person. How could I have given so much and still ended up forgotten? I thought about all those years, birthdays, Christmas mornings, school plays, baseball games, and how I always showed up for him, even when I had nothing left to give. And now, when the biggest day of his life came, my chair was empty. After a few days, I decided I couldn't live in that silence any longer. A mother's heart can only take so much wondering. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. My hands shook as it rang. I imagined his voice on the other end, imagined him saying, "Mama, I've been meaning to call you." But instead I got his voicemail. I waited for the beep, my heart pounding, and then I spoke. "David, it's Mama. I saw the pictures. I know you got married. I wish I could have been there, sweetheart. I don't know why I wasn't invited, but I just want you to know I love you. I'll always love you. Call me when you can." I hung up and sat there staring at the phone, waiting. Minutes passed, then hours, then the whole day. No call came. That night I barely slept. Every sound in the house felt louder. The ticking clock, the creak of the floorboards, the wind outside. I kept waking up, checking my phone, hoping maybe while I was sleeping he had reached out. But the screen stayed dark. The next morning I tried again. I sent him a message this time, typing slowly with my old fingers. "David, congratulations on your wedding. I would have loved to be there. Please call your mama when you can." I pressed send, my heart aching with every word. Hours turned into days and still no reply. It's a strange kind of pain, waiting for someone you love to call. Every vibration of the phone makes your heart leap, only to find it's just a neighbor, a telemarketer, or some random alert. Every time the phone rings and it's not him, it feels like another little crack in your heart. But I kept hoping. A mother's hope is stubborn, even when everything else is falling apart. A week passed, and I finally heard something about him, but not from him. A neighbor told me they had seen him and his new wife, Emily, at the diner in town. They said the two of them looked happy, holding hands, laughing together. My neighbor asked if I'd met Emily yet. I had to smile weakly and shake my head. "Not yet," I said, though what I wanted to say was, I wasn't given the chance. It hurt deeply to know strangers had spoken to my son's wife before I ever had. That night, I prayed again. I asked God why this was happening, why a child I carried in my own body, raised with every ounce of strength I had, could turn away from me so completely. I didn't get an answer, but something in my heart told me I couldn't give up. I had to keep trying, keep reaching out, because that's what mothers do. Even when the door is closed, even when the phone stays silent, a mother keeps knocking, keeps calling, keeps hoping. The hardest part wasn't just the silence, it was the memories. Every corner of my house reminded me of David. The porch where he used to play with his toy cars, the kitchen table where he did his homework, the hallway where I measured his height with pencil marks on the wall. Those marks are still there, though he hasn't stood against that wall in years. Sometimes I run my fingers over them, tracing the lines, remembering how proud he was each time he grew taller. And each time my chest tightens, because that little boy feels so far away now. In the quiet of those days, I found myself talking out loud as if he were still here. Do you remember when we baked cookies, David? You ate half the dough before it even went in the oven. Or, remember that time you were sick and I stayed up all night by your bed? It sounds foolish, I know, an old woman talking to the air. But in those moments, it felt like I still had a piece of him with me. But no matter how many times I whispered to the walls, the truth remained. My son had started a new chapter of his life, and he hadn't written me into it. And that was the hardest truth of all. It was about 2 weeks after I left those messages for David, and still the phone had stayed quiet. By then, the silence had settled into my bones like a winter chill that wouldn't leave. I had started moving slower, speaking less, and keeping to myself. Some days, I didn't even bother brushing my hair or putting on my shoes. I just sat on the porch, staring out at the road, hoping maybe I'd see his truck pull up. But the road stayed empty. One afternoon, as I was walking back from the little post office in town, I ran into Clara, an old neighbor of mine. Clara has always been one of those women who knows everything about everyone, whether you want her to or not. She spotted me from across the street and called out, "Mary, Lord, I've been meaning to talk to you." I forced a smile, though my stomach turned, because I knew what was coming. She crossed over and took my hand. "Honey, I don't know how to say this, but I think you should know. Folks have been talking, and well, David told people you two don't speak anymore. He said you and him had a falling out." My heart dropped. "A falling out?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "We never had a falling out. I never even raised my voice at him. Not really. What could he mean by that?" Clara sighed, her eyes soft with pity. "I don't know the whole story, but I heard his wife, Emily, doesn't much care for you. Supposedly she told him it was better if you weren't at the wedding. Something about not wanting drama." Those words sliced through me sharper than any knife. I felt dizzy, like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. "Not wanting drama," I whispered. I couldn't understand it. I had never even spoken to Emily, not more than a polite hello the one time she came to town with him. How could she dislike me so much? How could she convince my own son that his mother, his only family, was a problem to be left out? I thanked Clara for telling me, though my voice was hollow, and I walked the rest of the way home in a daze. My little house, which had always been my safe place, now felt like a cage. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands folded, staring at the wood grain, and the words echoed in my mind. Not wanting drama. I thought back over my whole life. I thought about the years I had spent raising David on my own, about how I worked myself nearly to death just so he could have food, clothes, and a roof over his head. Where was the drama in that? The only drama in our lives had been his father leaving, and even then, I never poisoned David's heart against him. I bit my tongue and swallowed my pride so that David could still have some kind of relationship with the man who walked away. And now, that same man had been sitting in the front row at my son's wedding, while I was left behind. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about Emily. I pictured her face, the smile in the wedding photos, the way she clung to David's arm. I tried to imagine what she thought of me. Did she think I was too poor, too old-fashioned, too embarrassing to stand beside them? Did she worry I would spoil their perfect day with my worn dress and tired face? I hated myself for even letting those thoughts creep in, but they did, and they ate at me. A few nights later, I got another piece of the truth. This time it came from Marlene, a woman I've known since church days. She called me on the phone, her voice low like she was sharing a secret. "Mary," she said, "I don't want to upset you, but I think you should know. I spoke to someone who was at the wedding. They told me David said you wouldn't have wanted to come anyway, that you two don't have much of a relationship anymore." My chest tightened so badly I had to sit down. "Wouldn't have wanted to come?" I repeated. My voice cracked. That's all I ever wanted, to see my boy happy, to watch him marry the woman he loves. Why would he think I wouldn't want to be there? Marlene hesitated, then said softly, "I think he's been telling people that you've been distant. Maybe he misunderstood something, or maybe she's been influencing him. But either way, that's what folks believe now." After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in someone's fist. All my life, I had been close to David. I was there for every step of his journey. And now people thought I didn't care. Worse, my son believed it too. That realization cut deeper than anything else, that he could rewrite our story in his mind, erasing all the love, all the years, until only distance remained. That night, I took out the old photo albums. I flipped through them slowly, tears blurring my eyes. There was David's first day of kindergarten, his smile wide as he wore a backpack almost bigger than him. There was David in his baseball uniform, dirt on his knees but pride in his eyes. There was David at prom, awkward in his tux, standing by the front porch. Page after page, memory after memory, proof of the bond we shared. Proof that I had been there for everything. I pressed my hand against one of the photos and whispered, "How could you forget, son? How could you let her tell you I wasn't there?" By morning, my sorrow had turned to a quiet kind of anger, not the loud, shouting kind, but the heavy, weary kind that sits in your chest and refuses to leave. I decided I needed to hear it from him, straight from his mouth. No more whispers, no more gossip. I dialed his number again. This time, it rang and rang until the voicemail came on. I took a deep breath and spoke. "David, it's Mama. I don't know what you've been told, but I need to hear it from you. Why wasn't I at your wedding? Why did you think I wouldn't want to be there? Son, please, I just need to understand." My voice broke on the last word. I hung up and sat with the phone in my lap, waiting, praying, begging for an answer. But once again, the silence swallowed me whole. After that last voicemail, the silence became unbearable. I tried to busy myself with little chores around the house, sweeping the porch, watering the plants, folding and refolding laundry that didn't need it. But no matter what I did, the quiet pressed down on me like a heavy blanket I couldn't escape. Every time the phone buzzed, my heart leapt, only to sink again when it wasn't him. The waiting began to eat at me, day by day, hour by hour. One morning, I found myself staring into the mirror, and I barely recognized the woman looking back. My hair, once neatly pinned, hung messy around my face. My eyes looked hollow, tired from too many sleepless nights. I pressed my hands against the sink and whispered to my reflection, "You've got to do something, Mary. You can't just sit here waiting for a call that may never come." That's when the anger came. Not wild anger, not the kind that shouts and breaks things, but the kind that rises slow and steady, like a storm rolling across the Texas plains. For weeks, I had let myself believe maybe it was my fault. Maybe I had done something wrong. Maybe I hadn't been good enough. But standing there, looking into those tired eyes, I felt a spark of defiance. I knew what kind of mother I had been. I had been present. I had been faithful. I had been strong. If my son had forgotten that, then maybe it was time to remind him. That afternoon, I pulled out a stack of old stationery from the drawer. The paper was yellowed with age, but it would do. I sat down at the kitchen table with a pen in hand and began to write. At first, the words wouldn't come. My hands trembled and the ink smeared. But once I started, it all came pouring out like a flood I'd been holding back for too long. Dear David, I don't know why I wasn't at your wedding. I don't know what you've been told about me, or why you think I wouldn't want to be there. But son, you need to hear the truth from your mama's heart. I wrote about the years when it was just him and me, about the nights I stayed up by his bedside, about the meals I skipped so he could eat more. I reminded him of the birthdays I saved pennies for just to buy him a toy, the school plays where I clapped until my hands hurt, the way I always told him he could do anything in this world. I wrote about his father leaving, and how I never poisoned him against that man, even when my own heart was breaking. I wanted you to have both parents, even if only one stayed. I wrote. And yet, on your wedding day, he was there and I was not. That cut deeper than anything else. The tears fell as I wrote, staining the paper, but I kept going. David, I don't want to fight. I don't want to blame. I only want to understand. If I made mistakes, tell me. If I hurt you in some way, forgive me. But don't shut me out, son. Don't erase me from your life. I may be old, I may be simple, but my love for you has never wavered. By the time I finished, the letter was several pages long. My hand ached, but my heart felt lighter, as if I had finally spoken aloud the words that had been choking me. I folded it carefully, slid it into an envelope, and wrote his address on the front with shaky handwriting. Then I walked down to the post office, my steps slow but determined, and dropped it in the box. On the walk home, I felt a strange calm wash over me. For the first time since that dreadful day, I felt like I had taken back a little control. I had spoken my truth, and whether or not he chose to read it, whether or not he chose to answer, I knew I had said what I needed to say. A mother's heart can't keep silent forever, not when it's breaking. The days that followed weren't easy. I still woke up each morning with that ache in my chest. Still checked my phone more times than I'd like to admit. But there was a difference now. Instead of waiting helplessly, I waited with a kind of peace. I had done my part. I had reached across the distance. The rest was up to him. In those quiet days, I found myself looking around the house with new eyes. I saw not just the emptiness, but also the love that had filled it once. I saw the faded drawings still taped to the fridge, the pencil marks on the doorframe that showed David's height year after year, the old baseball glove hanging by the back door. Each item was a reminder that I had done my job as a mother, even if the world didn't see it that way. I also began to lean on prayer more than ever. Each night, I knelt by my bed and whispered, Lord, I don't ask you to change David's heart if it's not your will. I only ask that he never forgets he was loved, that even if I die without seeing him again, he knows his mama cared. Those prayers became my strength, the thing that steadied me when the sadness threatened to swallow me whole. Weeks passed, and still no letter came back, no phone call, no text. And yet, something inside me had shifted. By writing that letter, I had let go of some of the blame I carried. I realized that sometimes, no matter how much you give, people will still choose their own paths. And sometimes those paths don't include you. It's a bitter truth, but it's one I had to face. Still, hope lingers. Hope is a stubborn thing. It doesn't die easy. I tell myself that maybe one day, when he's ready, David will open that letter and read every word. Maybe he'll see the truth of who I am, who I've always been, and he'll remember the bond we once shared. And maybe, just maybe, he'll come back to me. Until then, all I can do is wait. But now I wait not in silence, but with my truth written down, carried across miles in an envelope sealed with a mother's love. After I sent that letter, the days stretched long and slow. Each morning I still checked the mailbox with trembling hands, half hoping to find an envelope with my son's handwriting on it, half dreading the emptiness I knew I'd see instead. And most days, it was empty of anything meaningful, just bills, catalogs, or flyers for stores I never go to. But I kept checking because hope, even when it's battered, doesn't let go easy. At first, the silence stung just as badly as before. I would catch myself staring at the phone on the kitchen counter, almost willing it to ring. Sometimes I even imagined his voice. "Mama, I got your letter. Mama, I'm sorry." But the phone stayed still, and all I heard was the ticking of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator. Yet, as the weeks went by, something inside me began to shift. The act of writing that letter, pouring my heart onto those pages, had lifted a weight I hadn't realized was crushing me. For so long, I'd been choking on words left unsaid, but now they were out there, carried away in the hands of the postal worker, out of my keeping. Whether or not David chose to read them, I had done my part. And there's a strange sort of peace in that. I started finding strength in small things again. I began walking around the neighborhood in the mornings, letting the Texas sun warm my back and the soft breeze remind me I was still alive. I noticed the flowers blooming in my neighbor's yard, the laughter of children playing down the street, the way the sky painted itself in shades of pink and gold at sunset. Life had gone on, even while my heart was heavy, and slowly I began to let little bits of it back in. One day, I was at the diner in town, sitting at a corner booth with my coffee and a slice of pecan pie. I usually kept to myself, but that day the waitress, a young girl named Sarah, came over and smiled kindly at me. "Mrs. Mary," she said softly, "I just want you to know my mama told me what happened with your boy, and I think you're one of the strongest women I know. Not many could do what you've done, raising him all by yourself." Her words caught me off guard. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I forced a smile. "Thank you, honey," I whispered. That small kindness from someone who barely knew me lit a little spark in my chest. It reminded me that not everyone had judged me. Not everyone believed the whispers. Some still saw the truth of who I was. Other small mercies followed. One afternoon, a neighbor boy came over with his dog and offered to mow my lawn for free. "Mama says you've had a rough time," he told me. "We just wanted to help." I thanked him, my heart swelling at the innocence of his gesture. It wasn't much, but it reminded me that goodness still existed, that love could come from unexpected places. I also found comfort in the church, though I hadn't been going as often in recent years. One Sunday, I forced myself to dress, fixing my hair as best I could, and walked through those familiar doors. The hymns filled the air, and as I sat among people who had known me all my life, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in a long while. After the service, The pastor placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, "Mary, you've carried a heavy burden. But remember, God sees the love you gave, even if others forget." Those words stayed with me. Every night afterward, when I knelt to pray, I reminded myself that God had witnessed it all. The sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the tears I wiped away when no one was looking. Even if my son never acknowledged them, they weren't wasted. Love never is. The seasons began to change. The air grew cooler. The leaves on the trees around my little house turned shades of red and gold. With each passing day, I felt myself growing a little stronger. The ache in my chest didn't vanish. It never truly does. But I learned to carry it differently. Instead of letting it crush me, I let it remind me that I had loved deeply, and that was nothing to be ashamed of. I also found myself talking less about the pain and more about the memories. When neighbors would stop by, instead of speaking about the wedding, I would share stories of David's childhood, funny little moments, like how he once tried to fix the toaster with his toy screwdriver and ended up shocking himself, or the time he brought home a stray kitten and begged me to let him keep it. Remembering those moments brought both tears and laughter, but they reminded me of the bond we once had, a bond no wedding snub could erase completely. One evening, I sat on the porch watching the sunset, the sky glowing orange and purple, and I realized something. Yes, I had been left out of my son's wedding. Yes, it hurt more than words could ever say. But my story didn't end there. My life wasn't only defined by that pain. I still had mornings to wake up to, neighbors who cared, prayers to whisper, sunsets to watch. And though I carried the scar of that wound, I also carried the strength of having survived it. I don't know if David will ever read my letter. I don't know if he'll ever come back, knock on my door and say, "Mama, I'm sorry." But what I do know is this: I am still his mother. Nothing, not even being shut out of his wedding, can take that away. A mother's love isn't erased by silence or distance or even betrayal. It lingers, stubborn and steady, like the Texas wind that never really stops blowing. And so I wait. But I don't wait in despair anymore. I wait with hope, and with the quiet strength I've found in unexpected kindness, in prayer, and in the little joys of life. I wait knowing that no matter what happens, I loved my son with all I had, and that love in the end is enough. As I sit here tonight, rocking slowly in my old wooden chair on the porch, I feel the cool Texas breeze brushing across my face. The crickets are chirping their evening song, and the stars are just beginning to poke through the wide, open sky. Nights like this remind me how small I am in this big world, and yet how every small heartache feels so enormous when you're carrying it alone. When I first learned I wasn't invited to my son's wedding, I thought my world had ended. I thought I might break apart and never be whole again. The hurt was sharp like glass in my chest, and for a while I lived every day in that pain. But time has its way of softening even the harshest edges. The wound is still there, it will always be there, but I've learned to live with it, and in a strange way, it has taught me more about love than I ever expected. You see, love is not about being thanked or celebrated, or even remembered in the way you hope. Real love, the kind a mother carries for her child, is stubborn. It lingers long after the moments that caused it to bloom. It doesn't vanish, even when it's pushed aside or rejected. My son may have shut me out of one of the most important days of his life, but that does not erase the years of bedtime stories I read him, the scraped knees I kissed, or the prayers I whispered for him when he was sick. Those things are stitched into me, into my very being, and nothing, not even his silence, can take them away. In these quiet months since the wedding, I've learned something else too. Life is still worth living, even when your heart has been broken. The sun still rises each morning, and the birds still sing. My neighbors still wave when they pass by, and sometimes they even stop to sit with me a while. I've received kindness from unexpected places. A smile at the diner, a young boy mowing my lawn, a pastor's gentle reminder that God never forgets the love we give. These moments have been like little lamps lighting my way through the darkness. I've also learned to take comfort in my memories, even if they sometimes sting. I remember the day David was born, how tiny he was, and how I held him close, vowing to always protect him. I remember the first time he called me Mama, the sound of his laughter when he was small, the way he would fall asleep in my arms after a long day of play. Those memories remind me that once we did have something beautiful. And though life has pulled us apart, no one can take those moments away from me. They belong to me and to him forever. Sometimes people ask me if I hate him now, if I resent him for what he did. My answer is always the same: no. I can't hate my own child. I can't carry bitterness in my heart, because bitterness is a poison that destroys the one who drinks it. Instead, I choose to forgive him, even if he never asks for forgiveness. Forgiveness is not for him, it is for me. It frees me from the chains of anger and lets me live in peace. Do I still hope he'll come back one day? Yes, of course I do. Hope is something I cannot put down, no matter how many times life has tried to pry it from my hands. Maybe one day, years from now, he'll knock on my door with tears in his eyes and say, "Mama, I made a mistake." Maybe I'll finally get to hold him again, just as I did when he was small. But even if that day never comes, I will keep on loving him from afar, because that's what mothers do. I've also come to realize that my story, though painful, is not unique. There are many mothers and fathers out there who gave their all and were left behind, forgotten, or cast aside. If you're one of them and you happen to hear my story, I want you to know this: you are not alone. The love you gave was not wasted. Even if it feels unseen, even if it goes unreturned, love leaves a mark. It changes the world in ways we may never see. As for me, I will keep on living my days with quiet strength. I will tend to my little house, plant flowers in the spring, watch the birds at the feeder, and smile at the children who ride their bikes down the street. I will keep showing up at church on Sundays, lifting my voice in song and bowing my head in prayer. And every night, I will sit on this porch, watching the Texas sky, and I will whisper a blessing into the wind for my son, wherever he is, whatever he is doing. My story may have been marked by rejection, but it does not end there. It ends with resilience. It ends with forgiveness. It ends with hope. And most of all, it ends with love, the kind of love that no wedding invitation, or lack of one, can ever take away. So tonight, as the stars shine bright above me, I close my eyes and breathe deeply. My heart is no longer heavy in the same way it once was. It carries scars, yes, but it also carries strength. And if there's one thing I've learned in all my years, it's this: no matter how badly life may wound you, as long as you keep love alive in your heart, you will never truly be broken. That is my truth. That is my story.